Liam felt the weight of the silence like a physical shroud. It was a familiar pressure, one that settled over him every time he sat at a table with his wife's family. The restaurant, La Vigne Dorée, was a temple of quiet opulence, a place where the clinking of silverware on porcelain was a carefully orchestrated symphony, and whispers carried the gravity of pronouncements. He hated it. He hated the starched white tablecloths that felt as brittle as old paper, the wine glasses with stems so thin they seemed destined to shatter, and the suffocating air of judgment that was more potent than the expensive perfume worn by the other patrons. Clara, his wife, sat opposite him, a vision of curated perfection. Her dress was a sliver of dark silk that probably cost more than his monthly salary, and her smile was a weapon she wielded with practiced ease. It was a smile that never reached her eyes, especially not when she looked at him. Tonight it was particularly cold, a glittering frost that promised a harsh winter. Her mother, Eleanor, presided over the table from the head, a queen on a gilded throne. Her posture was ramrod straight, her expression a permanent mask of regal disdain. Beside her, Clara's brother Marcus lounged in his chair with a smirk that never quite left his face. He was a pale imitation of his mother's arrogance, a man who had mistaken inherited wealth for personal achievement. They were here to celebrate Marcus's latest venture, a tech startup with a vague premise and an astronomical budget, funded, of course, by Eleanor. For Liam, it was just another ordeal to be endured, another evening of thinly veiled insults and condescending questions about his work as a city librarian. It was a job he loved, a quiet world of stories and knowledge, but in their universe it was a mark of profound failure. "So, Liam," Eleanor began, her voice cutting through the atmosphere like a blade, "still alphabetizing books for a living? How quaint." Marcus snickered into his napkin. "Don't be so harsh, Mother. Someone has to keep the Dewey Decimal System from going extinct. It's a public service, really." Liam offered a tight, polite smile. "It's rewarding work. I help people find information, connect them with resources. It has its own value." "Value?" Clara repeated the word, as if it were a foreign object in her mouth. She sighed dramatically, a performance for her family. "Darling, we've talked about this. Ambition. It's not a dirty word. My father, God rest his soul, built an empire. Marcus is building the next one. I'm trying to launch my boutique, and you're content." She said the word content as if it were a terminal illness. The humiliation was a slow burn, a familiar heat rising in his chest. He had endured this for a decade. He had loved Clara, or at least the woman he thought she was when they first met. He had believed her talk of appreciating a simpler life was genuine. It turned out to be a fleeting phase, a dalliance with humility that she had quickly outgrown, leaving him as a relic of a past she was desperate to erase. The main course arrived, an intricate construction of fish and foam that looked more like modern art than food. As they ate, the conversation turned to Clara's boutique. She needed a significant investment from Eleanor, and this dinner was the final pitch. To secure it, she needed to demonstrate her complete alignment with the family's values, which meant distancing herself from anything or anyone perceived as weak. "The location is perfect," Clara said, her voice animated for the first time all evening. "But the initial outlay is substantial. Quality doesn't come cheap. We need to project success from the moment the doors open." Eleanor dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Success requires ruthlessness, Clara, and a partner who reflects your ambition. You cannot soar with eagles if you're tethered to a sparrow." Her gaze fell upon Liam, cold and heavy as granite. Liam felt the trap closing. He knew what was coming. Clara had been distant and cruel for weeks, building up to this. She needed to prove to her mother that she was shedding her last liability. Him. "I know, Mother," Clara said, her voice dropping to a serious, confessional tone. She looked directly at Liam, her eyes devoid of any warmth or affection. The smile was gone, replaced by a cruel, sharp line. "I've been tethered for too long. I've tried to lift him up, to inspire him, but it's pointless." She turned her hand over, palm up, a gesture of exasperated surrender. "He brings nothing to the table. No ambition, no connections, no wealth. He contributes nothing."
He is, and it pains me to say this, but it's the truth. He is utterly and completely worthless. The word hung in the air, a devastating final blow. It was not whispered. It was declared, loud enough for the adjacent tables to hear. A hush fell over their section of the restaurant. Faces turned. The silence he had felt earlier was now a crushing, suffocating void. He saw pity in the eyes of a waiter, surprise on the faces of the couple dining nearby. His heart felt like it had stopped. Worthless. The word echoed in the cavern of his chest. After 10 years of quiet support, of managing their modest home, while she chased ever more expensive dreams, of loving her despite her growing coldness, this was his summary. This was his value. Eleanor nodded, a slow, satisfied motion. "A hard truth, but a necessary one. You have our support for the boutique, my dear." Marcus raised his glass. "To new beginnings." They clinked their glasses together over the wreckage of Liam's dignity.
He sat frozen, the food on his plate turning to ash in his mouth. He wanted to disappear, to dissolve into the plush velvet of the booth. But as his gaze drifted, unfocused and pained, it landed on a small bronze plaque on the wall next to their table. It was unassuming, easily missed. He had glanced at it before but never truly read it. Now the words seemed to leap out at him. "In eternal gratitude to our benefactor, the Astor Foundation, whose quiet generosity made this establishment possible." Astor. The name struck him like a bolt of lightning. It was his mother's maiden name. It was the name on the dusty old box his grandfather had left him, the one he had never opened. In that moment of profound public humiliation, a forgotten key turned in the lock of his memory. A seed, dormant for decades, had just been watered with the bitter tears of his own shame, and it was beginning to grow. The history of their marriage was a slow, painful erosion of his spirit. When Liam first met Clara, she had seemed like a breath of fresh air. She claimed to be tired of the shallow world she was born into, a world of posturing and performative wealth. She was captivated by his quiet intelligence, his love for history and literature, and his apparent immunity to the materialistic desires that consumed her family. He worked at a university library then, a place of peaceful, scholarly pursuit. He had believed her. He had fallen in love with the idea of a woman who could see the richness in a life not measured by bank statements. Their first few years were deceptively happy. They lived in a small but comfortable apartment, took simple vacations, and spent evenings talking about books and ideas. Liam felt seen, valued for his mind and his gentle nature. But the facade began to crack subtly, then all at once. Her father's death was the turning point. Suddenly the family's wealth, once an abstract concept she claimed to reject, became a central, gravitational force in her life. Eleanor, now the sole controller of the family fortune, reeled Clara back into her orbit with the promise of power and luxury. The simple life was no longer a charming choice. It was a cage. The insult started as gentle prodding. "Maybe you should think about a career with more upward mobility, darling." This evolved into open criticism. His clothes were not right. His car was an embarrassment. His friends, mostly academics and artists, were deemed uninteresting and common. He was a project she had failed to complete, a fixer-upper she had lost the patience to renovate. He endured it, hoping the woman he had married was still in there somewhere, buried beneath layers of Italian silk and resentment. He took on a second job at the public library to help fund her increasingly expensive tastes, working weekends while she attended galas and charity auctions without him. He became a ghost in his own life, a silent partner whose only role was to not get in the way of her ascent. Clara and her family operated on a simple, brutal philosophy. You were either a predator or prey, a winner or a loser. Wealth was not just a means to comfort. It was a moral scorecard. Those who had it were intelligent, superior, and deserving. Those who did not were lazy, foolish, and contemptible. There was no room for nuance, no appreciation for a different kind of richness. Eleanor, in particular, saw the world as a rigid hierarchy with her family perched near the top. She had married into money and wielded it like a scepter, demanding fealty and performance from her children. Her approval was transactional, granted only in exchange for actions that enhanced the family's status. Marcus's tech company, though built on buzzwords and smoke, was acceptable because it sounded impressive and modern. Clara's boutique, catering to the ultra-wealthy, was a perfect move. Liam's library was a stain on their collective honor. Their own financial standing, however, was far more fragile than they let on. Liam knew from overheard, stressed phone calls and discreetly examined mail that their lifestyle was financed by a mountain of debt. Eleanor's mansion was mortgaged to the hilt. Marcus had burned through 2 previous startups, leaving a trail of angry investors. Their arrogance was a shield, protecting a core of deep insecurity. They were terrified of falling, of becoming the very people they so openly despised. The day after the disastrous dinner, Liam moved in a fog of quiet fury. The word worthless was branded onto his thoughts. He went to work, mechanically stamping books and answering questions, but his mind was elsewhere. It was in the attic of his modest house, with a dusty, forgotten box. That evening, while Clara was out with her mother, strategizing the launch, he pulled down the attic ladder. The air was thick with the scent of old wood and forgotten memories. In the corner, under a canvas sheet, was the small wooden chest his grandfather had left him. His grandfather, Arthur Astor, had been a watchmaker, a quiet, meticulous man who had raised him after his parents passed away. He had taught Liam the value of patience, precision, and finding beauty in small, intricate things. He had never opened the box. His grandfather's will had been simple, leaving him the house and a small savings account. The letter attached to the box simply said, "For when you need to know the time." Liam had always assumed it contained old watchmaking tools or perhaps a special timepiece. He had never felt the need. Until now. His hands trembled slightly as he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was not a watch, but a single, ornate, old-fashioned key and a thick, sealed envelope. The paper was heavy, creamy, and bore the letterhead of a law firm. Sterling and Croft Private Counsel. He broke the wax seal. The letter was in his grandfather's familiar, elegant script. It began not with a greeting, but with a philosophy. It spoke of the corrosive nature of unearned wealth, of how it could stunt a person's growth and blind them to true value. "I wanted you to build a life on your own terms, my boy," it read. "To discover your own worth, not have it handed to you." The letter went on to explain. His grandfather was not merely a watchmaker. That was his passion, his retreat from the world. In his youth, he had been a prodigy, a brilliant and reclusive investor who had turned a small inheritance into a vast, silent empire. He had built it, then hidden it away living a simple life and ensuring his grandson would do the same. The fortune was immense, managed by Sterling and Croft, and held within a series of trusts and holding companies under a single name: the Astor Foundation. The key was for a private vault in the firm's offices. The letter concluded with a simple instruction: when the world tells you what you are worth, use this to show them they are wrong. The time is now yours. Liam sat on the dusty attic floor, the letter in his hand, his world completely upended. He was not worthless. He was, by the world's standards, one of the wealthiest men alive. Meanwhile, Clara's confidence was soaring. Having secured her mother's financial backing and, more importantly, her ideological approval, she felt invincible. She treated Liam with an air of dismissive pity. She was shedding her old skin, and he was part of the discard pile. "I'm going to be signing the lease for the boutique space next week," she announced a few days later, not even looking up from her phone. "Things are moving very quickly. I'll need you to start packing your things. I think it's best if you find a small apartment. It will be less complicated." She was casting him aside like a piece of old furniture. There was no discussion, no remorse. It was a business decision. He was a bad investment, and she was cutting her losses. Her cruelty was casual, unthinking, and absolute. She and her family were utterly convinced of his powerlessness, of their complete and total control. They had no idea the ground beneath their feet was about to crumble into a bottomless abyss. The offices of Sterling and Croft were located in a historic downtown building, a fortress of granite and brass that spoke of old money and unbreakable discretion. Liam, dressed in his best but still simple suit, felt like an impostor. The lobby was a cathedral of marble and dark wood, the air silent save for the soft ticking of a grandfather clock that stood in the corner. He clutched the old key in his pocket, its metal cool and solid against his skin. It was his only proof that he belonged here. He was led into a large corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. A man who looked to be in his late 70s rose from behind a massive mahogany desk. He was tall and impeccably dressed with kind eyes and a warm, genuine smile. "Mr. Liam Astor?" he asked, extending a hand. "I am Howard Sterling. I have been waiting for you for a very long time. Your grandfather was a remarkable man and a dear friend." For the next 2 hours, Mr. Sterling explained the full extent of Arthur Astor's legacy. It was an empire built in the shadows, a labyrinth of assets so vast and diversified that it was almost impossible to comprehend. There were real estate holdings in every major city, controlling stakes in tech companies and financial institutions, and portfolios of art and rare artifacts. The numbers Mr. Sterling presented were staggering, more money than Liam could even conceptualize. It was not millions, it was billions. Mr. Sterling explained the philosophy behind the intricate structure. "Your grandfather called it the Silent Empire," he said. "He believed that true power was invisible. He wanted you to live a life free from its weight, to build your character on a foundation of humility and hard work. He trusted that when the time was right, you would have the wisdom to wield this responsibility." Liam felt a wave of emotion wash over him. Grief for the grandfather he now realized he barely knew, and a profound sense of gratitude for the gift he had been given. It was not just a gift of wealth, but a gift of a genuine life, a life where he had been forced to forge his own identity. He then guided Liam to a heavy vault door at the back of the office. Liam used the key. Inside was not gold or jewels, but rows upon rows of ledgers and deeds, the paper nervous system of the foundation. Mr. Sterling pulled out a single, thick binder. "This is the portfolio for this city alone," he explained. He flipped through the pages, his finger stopping on a particular entry. Ah, here we are. A commercial property. A restaurant, to be precise. La Vigne Dorée. Liam's breath caught in his throat. The room, the table, the very spot where he had been shattered, belonged to him. The irony was so thick it was almost suffocating. Mr. Sterling, sensing the shift in Liam's demeanour, looked at him with a knowing expression. "Is that establishment of some significance to you?" Liam told him everything. The years of quiet humiliation, the relentless condescension, and the final, brutal declaration at the dinner. He spoke of Clara, Eleanor, and Marcus, of their obsession with status and their cruel dismissal of his worth. As he finished the story, Mr. Sterling's kindly expression hardened into one of cold resolve. He turned a few more pages in the binder. He paused, a grim look on his face. "Well, this is most interesting," he said softly. "It seems the web is more tangled than we thought." He pointed to another entry. "The primary financial institution that holds the mortgage on your mother-in-law's residence, and the very same bank considering a commercial loan for your wife's boutique, is Consolidated Metropolitan Bank." He paused for dramatic effect. "The Astor Foundation, through a series of holding companies, is the majority shareholder of their parent corporation." The revelation landed with the force of a physical blow. Their entire world, their home, their aspirations, their social standing, was built on a foundation that he, the worthless man they despised, controlled completely. They were not eagles circling above him. They were mice in a maze of his own design, and they had no idea. In that moment, something inside Liam shifted. The years of patient endurance, of turning the other cheek, of hoping for a change that would never come, were over. The hurt was still there, a deep, aching wound, but it was now overlaid with something new. A cold, clear, and unshakable sense of purpose. The sleeping giant was awake. He looked at Howard Sterling, the kindly lawyer who was now his most powerful ally. The question of what to do next hung unspoken in the air. His grandfather had wanted him to have the wisdom to wield this power. Wisdom, he now realized, was not just about building things up. Sometimes it was about tearing things down. "Mr. Sterling," Liam said, his voice steady and firm, a voice he barely recognized as his own. "My wife and her family believe in the language of money and power. I think it's time I became fluent." He picked up a pen from the desk, its weight feeling significant in his hand. He signed the final document on the desk, the one that transferred full, active control of the Astor Foundation to him. The decision was made. A war had been declared on him in that restaurant, and he was now going to end it. The strategy session that followed was a masterclass in surgical destruction. Liam, guided by the seasoned wisdom of Howard Sterling, laid out a plan that was not born of rage, but of a chillingly calm desire for justice. It would be a response in the language his wife's family understood, a systematic dismantling of their world, using the very systems they revered. "They worship at the altar of finance," Liam stated, pacing the office. "Their sense of self is tied to their assets, their credit, their social standing. We will not attack them personally. We will simply re-evaluate their portfolio." Mr. Sterling nodded, a thin, approving smile on his lips. "Elegant. We use their own rules against them. No laws broken, no overt aggression. Just the cold, impartial mechanics of business." The plan was multi-pronged, a cascade designed to hit them from all sides at once. Phase 1 was Eleanor. Mr. Sterling explained that her mortgage was a high-risk, adjustable-rate loan that the bank had been eager to offload. A simple directive from the parent company's board would be enough to trigger a clause allowing the bank to call the loan in, demanding full payment. It was legally sound, if highly unusual. Phase 2 was Clara, Her loan application for the boutique was still pending. A word to the bank's commercial loan division, highlighting the instability of her family's financial situation, soon to be made very real by the mortgage recall, would guarantee a swift and decisive rejection. Her dream would die before it even began. Phase 3 targeted Marcus. His tech startup was built on inflated projections and questionable ethics. An anonymous but highly detailed tip to the appropriate financial regulators would trigger an investigation that his flimsy business model could not possibly survive. His seed funding would vanish overnight. The final piece was the restaurant itself, La Vigne Dorée. It was the stage for his greatest humiliation, and it would become the symbol of his victory. Their lease was up for renewal in 2 months. Mr. Sterling's property management division would send them a formal, non-negotiable notice of termination. The temple of their arrogance would be deconsecrated. "They will have no idea it's you," Mr. Sterling assured him. "To them, it will feel like the world is collapsing for no reason. A string of terrible luck. They will blame the economy, the banks, each other. They will never suspect the man they dismissed as worthless holds all the strings." The thought brought a grim satisfaction to Liam. He wanted them to feel that powerlessness, that confusion, that terror of a world turning against them for reasons they could not comprehend. He wanted them to feel exactly as they had made him feel for a decade. With the plan in place, the initiation was swift. Mr. Sterling made a series of quiet, powerful phone calls from his office. Liam watched as the old lawyer spoke in calm, measured tones, issuing directives that would shatter a family's reality. There was no shouting, no threats, just the quiet, unstoppable movement of immense power. A few emails were sent. A few documents were digitally signed. The first domino was pushed. The machine of their downfall was now in motion. The first sign of the coming storm arrived in a crisp, cream-colored envelope at Eleanor's mansion. She opened it nonchalantly, assuming it was another invitation to a gala. Her eyes scanned the first line, then widened in disbelief. She read it again, her perfectly manicured hand beginning to tremble. It was a letter from Consolidated Metropolitan Bank. It was formal, polite, and utterly devastating. Citing market volatility and a portfolio risk reassessment, the bank was exercising its right to call in her mortgage. The full balance, a 7-figure sum, was due in 30 days. Panic, cold and sharp, seized her. It was impossible, a mistake. She immediately called her personal banker, a man who had always fawned over her, but his tone was different now. It was respectful, but firm. There was nothing he could do. The decision had come from the highest levels. Her world tilted on its axis. The mansion was not just her home, it was the bedrock of her identity, the physical manifestation of her superiority. The thought of losing it was like the thought of losing a limb. Her frantic call to Clara was a torrent of fear and fury. Clara, who was at that moment reviewing fabric swatches for her future boutique, listened with growing alarm. Her own confidence was shattered just hours later. An email arrived from the bank. Her loan application had been denied. The reason given was vague. Unfavorable risk assessment of the guarantor's financial stability. The guarantor was her mother. The two women met in Eleanor's opulent living room, the very picture of wealth and success, now feeling like a stage set for a tragedy. Disbelief warred with terror. "This is a coordinated attack," Eleanor declared, pacing the Persian rug. "Someone is trying to ruin us. It must be Henderson from the club. He's always been jealous." They scrambled, calling in favors, trying to leverage their social connections, but every door they pushed was firmly locked. Their calls went unreturned. Friends who had once eagerly sought their company were suddenly unavailable. It was as if a memo had gone out to the entire elite circle, marking them as socially radioactive. The third blow landed on Marcus. He arrived at his sleek, minimalist office to find two stern-faced individuals from the Securities and Exchange Commission waiting for him. They had received a highly credible tip regarding potential investor fraud. His accounts were frozen pending an investigation. His primary investors, spooked by the merest hint of legal trouble, pulled their funding within hours. His company, which had existed mostly on paper and bravado, ceased to exist. From a distance, Liam watched the chaos unfold. He maintained his quiet, unassuming demeanor, a mask of gentle concern. When Clara came home, her face a mask of rage and despair, he offered a cup of tea. "It's all falling apart, Liam," she wept, though her tears were more of frustration than sadness. "The bank rejected my loan. Mother might lose the house. It's a nightmare." "Oh, Clara, that's terrible," he said, his voice a soft murmur of feigned sympathy. "I'm so sorry."
"Is there anything at all I can do to help?" The question was a bitter, private joke. She looked at him with contempt, even in her distress. "Help?" she scoffed. "What could you possibly do? This is a world you don't understand. This is about real money, real power. You can't fix this by reshelving a book." Her words no longer stung. They were simply confirmation. Confirmation that he was doing the right thing. He watched her storm through the house, making frantic calls, her voice growing more shrill with each rejection. He saw the arrogance crack, revealing the terrified, hollow person beneath. The dramatic irony was exquisite. He, the worthless man, was the only one who could save her, and he was the one orchestrating her demise. A week later, stripped of her boutique dreams and watching her family's world crumble, Clara made a desperate final move. She decided she needed a clean break and a final act of public dominance. She called Liam.
"We need to have one last family dinner," she said, her voice brittle. "At La Vigne Dorée, we have things to finalize." Liam knew exactly what she was planning. She would publicly announce their divorce, attempting to frame herself as the victim, cutting ties with her worthless husband to save her own sinking ship. She wanted to humiliate him one last time on the very same stage. "Of course, dear," Liam said calmly. "I'll be there." He knew this was it. The final act. It was time to pull back the curtain and reveal the puppet master. The atmosphere at La Vigne Dorée was even more charged than the last time. The family was a portrait of barely contained hysteria. Eleanor's face was drawn and pale, Marcus was sullen and resentful, and Clara radiated a desperate, aggressive energy. They took the same table, a fact that Liam found grimly appropriate. It was a crime scene, and they had returned for the final reckoning. They dispensed with the pleasantries. Before the waiter could even take their drink order, Clara fixed Liam with a look of pure venom. "We need to discuss the terms of our separation," she began, her voice loud and clear, designed to be overheard. "Given the unfortunate financial downturn my family is experiencing, I will need significant support from you." Marcus snorted. "Good luck with that. What are you going to get? Half of his library card collection?" Eleanor, however, looked calculating. "Don't be a fool, Marcus. He has a steady job, a government pension. In times of crisis, stability has its own value. He will provide for Clara. He owes her that for holding her back all these years." It was the final, incredible piece of their delusion. Even in their ruin, they saw him as a resource to be plundered, a small, reliable stream to tap now that their own ocean was drying up. Liam listened patiently, letting them expose the full, naked depth of their greed and entitlement. He let the silence stretch for a moment, savoring their arrogant certainty. Then he placed his hands on the table and leaned forward slightly. The quiet, deferential librarian was gone. The man who spoke now was someone they had never met. "No," he said. The word was quiet, but it landed with the force of a gavel. "I don't think that's how this is going to go." He looked at Clara, his eyes holding hers. "You spent 10 years treating me like I was an unfortunate piece of furniture you had inherited. You belittled my work, my life, my very existence, and in this exact spot you called me worthless for the whole world to hear." He let that sink in. "You were so busy judging the price of my shoes that you never bothered to look at the name on the wall." He gestured with his head toward the bronze plaque. "The Astor Foundation, my grandfather's foundation, my foundation." Clara stared at him, her brow furrowed in confusion. "What are you talking about? Your name isn't Astor." "It was my mother's name," Liam said calmly. "A name I am now proud to use. You see, this building, this restaurant you love so much because it makes you feel important. I own it." A flicker of disbelief crossed Clara's face, quickly replaced by a sneer. "You're insane! You're a librarian! You're making this up to try and hurt me!" Liam smiled, a cold, thin smile that did not reach his eyes. "Am I? Let's talk about Consolidated Metropolitan Bank. A fine institution, is it not? The same one that holds the mortgage on your mother's house, the same one that so wisely decided not to fund your little vanity project. It's amazing what a majority shareholder can accomplish with a few quiet phone calls." The colour drained from Eleanor's face. Marcus, for the first time, looked truly frightened. The pieces were clicking into place, forming a picture so monstrously impossible they could barely comprehend it.
"It was you," Clara whispered, her voice trembling. "The loan. My mother's house. It was all you?" "I simply helped the system see you for what you are," Liam corrected her. "A bad investment, all of you. You built your lives on a foundation of arrogance and debt, and you thought it would last forever. But what you didn't know was that the foundation was mine, and I decided it was time for a renovation." At that moment, as if on cue, the restaurant manager, a distinguished man named Jean-Pierre, approached the table. He ignored the others completely, his attention focused solely on Liam. "Mr. Astor," he said, with a deep, respectful bow. "It is an honor to have you with us tonight. I trust everything is to your satisfaction. I have the quarterly reports ready for your review whenever you are." The public confirmation was the final, shattering blow. The truth was undeniable. Clara's face crumpled. The carefully constructed mask of superiority dissolved into a mess of raw, ugly disbelief. "No," she stammered. "No, you're a liar, a nobody." She began to scream, a wild, unhinged sound that echoed through the silent restaurant. She lunged across the table, trying to claw at him, her face contorted in a mask of pure hatred. "You did this to me! You ruined me!" Jean-Pierre and another waiter gently but firmly restrained her as she descended into a complete public breakdown, sobbing and shrieking. Eleanor seemed to have shrunk into her chair, looking 100 years old. Marcus just stared, his mouth agape, a picture of pathetic, broken arrogance. Liam stood up, the chaos swirling around him. He felt a strange, quiet calm. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a set of folded legal documents, placing them gently on the table in front of Clara's empty chair. "I believe these are for you," he said, his voice even. They were divorce papers. His lawyer had drawn them up that afternoon. He was citing irreconcilable differences. There would be no alimony. He was leaving her with exactly what she had always told him he had. Nothing. Without another word, he turned his back on the wreckage of their lives and walked out of the restaurant. He didn't look back.
He left them to their ruin, surrounded by the shocked stares and whispered judgments of the very people whose approval they had lived and died for. The reckoning was complete. The aftermath was swift and brutal. Eleanor's mansion was foreclosed upon, its contents auctioned off to strangers. She was forced to move into a small, rented condo, a bitter and forgotten woman stripped of her status and power. Marcus was indicted on charges of wire fraud and securities violations. He avoided prison but was left bankrupt and unemployable, a pariah in the business community he had so desperately wanted to conquer. Clara's fate was perhaps the most poignant. With no money, no family support, and no discernible skills beyond spending money, she was adrift. The divorce left her with nothing. Her so-called friends abandoned her overnight. She was forced to take a job as a retail clerk in a department store, folding sweaters and dealing with rude customers for minimum wage. The cruelest irony was that she, who had judged everyone on their appearance, now spent her days in a drab uniform, invisible and anonymous. She had become the very thing she had always feared, an ordinary person. Liam, in stark contrast, did not embrace the extravagant lifestyle his wealth afforded him. He sold the grand, empty house he had shared with Clara and moved into a comfortable but modest apartment in a quiet part of the city. He resigned from his job at the public library, but his connection to that world was far from over. He used the vast resources of the Astor Foundation to pursue his true passion. He established a national literacy program, funding under-resourced libraries in impoverished communities and creating scholarships for aspiring librarians. He found a new purpose, not in accumulating wealth, but in distributing knowledge and opportunity. His work was quiet, impactful, and deeply fulfilling. He was building something that would last, something with true value. About a year after the divorce, he was visiting a university archive he was helping to fund when he met Anna. She was the head archivist, a woman with a sharp mind, a quick laugh, and a passion for history that matched his own. She knew him only as Liam, a philanthropist with a keen interest in her work. She was drawn to his kindness, his quiet intelligence, and his genuine humility. Their relationship grew organically, built on a foundation of shared interests and mutual respect. He eventually told her the whole story, not as a boast, but as a necessary piece of his past. She listened, not with awe at his wealth, but with compassion for the pain he had endured. She loved him for the man he was, the man who had been forged in quiet suffering and had emerged with his gentle spirit intact. For the first time in his life, he felt truly seen and unconditionally loved. One crisp autumn afternoon, Liam and Anna were walking through a public park, hand in hand. A new library, its construction funded by his foundation, stood proudly on the far side of the park, its doors open to everyone. Children ran in and out, their arms full of books. He saw a young boy sitting on a bench, completely lost in a story, his face a mask of wonder. In that moment, Liam felt a profound sense of peace. He had faced the ugliest parts of human nature, greed, cruelty, and arrogance, and had not let them corrupt him. He had learned that his ex-wife's final cruel assessment of him had been, in a way, correct. In her world, the world of glittering surfaces and hollow values, he truly was worthless, and he had never been more grateful for it. True wealth, he now understood, was not measured in dollars or stock prices. It was measured in purpose, in kindness, and in the quiet joy of a life lived with integrity. True power lay not in what you could control or command, but in the good you could create. He had been given a great responsibility, and he was finally living up to it, a quiet king in a silent empire built not of gold but of knowledge and hope,